I think the first thing that drew me to etching was its capacity for detail. Someone told me that you could achieve a finer line with etching than you ever could with drawing. The first time I tried it was in a family friend's house. She had a printing press in her garage. She had set up a small acid bath in her kitchen for the day and had prepared small plates for us to draw on. I drew a series of small watch and clock faces on the soft ground. Of course, once the image had been etched, inked up and printed, all my clocks were running backwards. I hadn't understood that I was creating a stamp, the mirror image of what I wanted the final image to be. That's an inherent part of the printer's thought process. We're always thinking in mirror image. Preparing a plate feels like something of a ritual. We file the edges of our plates, degrease them, cover them in a waxy ground, and then we draw our image with a scribe, exposing copper lines in the prepared surface. Despite any printer's best effort to control the medium, there are always surprises and unplanned marks. It took me time to learn to embrace them, to work with them, to navigate the process and accept that some days the acid, the aquatint, the wax grounds all seem to have a mind of their own. The technique that I rely on most in my work is aquatint, which creates tone. The longer the plate is exposed to the acid, the more ink it can hold. In etching, we protect the light areas first, before incrementally stopping out areas of each tonal value, working through every density from white to black. So we're not just thinking in mirror image, we're also having to think negative to positive, inverting the image in order to process it. I think because so much of my work uses film and photography as its primary source, I find myself playing with the formal mechanisms of other media and how they relate to print. Negatives, montage, double and overexposure, tracking shots, the relationship between analog and digital, zoom and close-ups, photo collage. They all make their way onto my plates. Aesthetically, the influence of cinema and photography are littered throughout my etchings. The shadows of film noir, the experiments of Man Ray. I love the drama of black and white, the information it gives the viewer and the part it lets you fill in, the nostalgia that comes with it. I think most people looking at my work would think that the architecture was the subject matter, but I've realised it's actually the light, which is as unique to any city as its buildings. I'm catching places at very specific moments in time when the shadows and reflections play with these solid structures, creating an inventory of light and shade. Fundamentally, photographs are just records of light, but unlike the physical processes that etching relies on, my camera is digital. It records the date and time and sequence of my images far better than I ever could. From this information, my imagery is carried from pixel back to plate. In my hands, the details are distorted and manipulated into works on paper that only vaguely remember their digital origins. So it's no wonder Google Street View appeals to me. Years ago, I started using Google Maps and later Street View for any number of practical purposes. I navigated new cities with it. I went to view apartments in new neighbourhoods. I found pubs where friends were meeting. But about a year ago, my use of it changed. It was the aesthetic side of this mapping software that began to fascinate me. It started with a project I was doing for an Italian friend's album art. I'd known him when I lived in Italy. He asked me to create etchings he could use, and I found myself compelled to draw him in his natural habitat, Bologna. I knew the places he gigged, lived, worked, but I wasn't there in person to take research photos the way I normally would have. So I took screen grabs of Google Street View instead. I sat there at my desk in Dublin revisiting places I had been, finding the places I knew I needed to etch for the work to make sense. I turned corners, wandered streets, and rediscovered old haunts, all through my laptop screen. It was jarring both because the streets felt familiar and also because they felt utterly strange. Some were undergoing roadworks, some shops had changed name or closed down, some piazzas were documented in winter, others in spring, Some were busy with people walking to work, their faces blurred to abstraction. It showed me versions of nearly every place I'd ever been, stitched together from thousands of photographs, collected by the automated camera on top of Google's van. For me, the most interesting part of Google Street View are the fractures. The places where the stitches between the still images are visible. Our eyes ignore the majority of glitches we see so long as software continues to function. But spend any amount of time with a still from Street View and you'll see them. Places where street lighting can't meet, where the panes of glass in the windows waver and break apart. Lampposts that bend at unnatural angles. I remember once seeing the tip of a boom mic appear by mistake in a film. It shattered my ability to suspend my disbelief. It reminded me of the production, the labour it takes behind the scenes to make the drama seamless. I was looking straight at one of the stitches, and its effect was similar to that of Street View's fractures. These glitches remind us as we move through this virtual space that we're looking at pixels on a screen. Someday technology will be so sophisticated that all these glitches will have been ironed out. But until then, I'm gathering them up, immortalizing them, lending them a solid form in my plates. I've always been terribly ludic. My relationship with technology is a complicated one. On the one hand, it fascinates me, and on the other, it terrifies me. I love analog. I like old sewing machines, vinyl, cassettes, typewriters, film cameras, old radios. Maybe it's because I stand the faintest chance of understanding them, or maybe it's because they're tactile. To hold an object and feel its weight is to know it. I know the weight of copper, the etched lines under my fingers, the feel of my only scribe in my hand. I've often thought it no coincidence that the word etch is used to describe how images make their mark upon our memories. Every detail etched into my mind. There are certain places one never forgets, ones that engraved themselves into my psyche. I virtually revisit them. I etch them again outside of myself, broken and changed and edited, like all our memories are.